The notice was taped to my front door when I got home from my overnight shift, and it accused me of violating appearance standards because of a salt stain on my driveway. I am a city bus driver in Georgetown, Texas, and I keep odd hours because of split shifts and overnight routes. I bought this house in Desert Vista HOA 6 months ago because it was affordable and close to the depot. The neighborhood is a new-build suburb with identical lawns and constant construction noise from the ongoing development 3 streets over. I thought the HOA would be a minor annoyance, the kind of thing where you keep your trash cans hidden and your grass cut. I was saving every extra dollar for a down payment on a small rental property, something that could give me income security when I am too old to drive a bus 12 hours a day. Then I met Alicia Blackwell. Alicia is the finance committee lead for Desert Vista HOA Incorporated, and she has dark brown hair pulled into a tight bun and always wears a burgundy parka with matching burgundy earmuffs, even when it is barely cold. She carries a clipboard with color-coded sticky notes labeled by storm dates, and she uses it like a weapon. The notice on my door was signed by her, not the management company. It claimed the salt stain was unsightly and demanded I pressure wash my driveway within 48 hours or face a $50 daily fine. I pulled out my phone and took pictures of the stain. It was maybe 8 inches across, white and crystalline where the ice melt had dried after I treated the driveway during the freeze 2 nights before. Every driveway on the block had similar marks. I walked down the street and photographed 6 other driveways with worse staining. Then I checked the Desert Vista HOA covenants on my laptop. There was nothing about salt stains. The appearance standards section mentioned peeling paint, broken fences, and overgrown yards. Salt residue from winter weather treatment was not listed. I called the management company listed on the Desert Vista HOA website. The woman who answered said she would check my file and call me back. She never did. I sent an email to the generic HOA address asking for clarification on the violation. No response. I printed the photos of the other driveways and put them in a folder with a copy of the covenants and a timeline. That was when I started keeping the clipboard. The clipboard became my signature detail. I bought a pack of color-coded sticky notes, the kind with 5 different colors, and I labeled every document by storm date. Blue for the first freeze on January 4th, yellow for the second freeze on January 7th, green for the third freeze on January 10th, which was yesterday. I stuck the notes on the edges of photos, emails, covenant pages, and weather reports. The clipboard went everywhere with me. On the second day, I pressure washed my driveway even though I did not think I had to. I wanted to show good faith. The stain faded but did not disappear completely because salt etches into concrete. I took photos showing the clean driveway and emailed them to the management company and the generic HOA address. I wrote that I had complied and requested written confirmation that the matter was closed. No response. On the third day, I got a second notice. This one claimed I had missed a mandatory appearance at an HOA hearing on January 9th. I was never told about a hearing on January 9th. I checked my mail, my email, my phone messages. Nothing. The notice said that because I failed to appear, the board had voted to impose a $200 fine for the salt stain violation, plus a $100 fee for missing the hearing. It also said I now had a formal reprimand on my HOA record, which could affect future requests for exterior modifications. That was when I knew this was not about a salt stain. This was about control, and Alicia Blackwell was using a management company employee to harass and escalate. I called the management company again and asked to speak to a supervisor. The woman who answered said the supervisor was unavailable and took a message. I asked for the name of the employee who had processed my violation. She said she could not give out employee names. I asked for a copy of the hearing notice that was supposedly sent to me on January 9th. She said records requests required a $50 processing fee and a written request form. I was starting to see the pattern. Every step cost money. Every step required paperwork. Every step gave them another chance to deny, delay, or escalate. I had $300 in fines on the books, and I had no proof I had ever been notified of a hearing. My savings account had $4,200 in it, money I had been building for 2 years. The HOA was trying to drain me with bogus fees, and if I did not fight back, they would bleed me dry and kill my rental property dream. I printed the $50 processing fee form from the HOA website and mailed it with a check and a formal written request for the January 9th hearing notice. I also requested copies of all board meeting minutes from the past 6 months, all violation notices issued to any homeowner in the past year, and all financial records showing how processing fees were used. If they wanted to play paperwork games, I would bury them in requests. Then I went to see my neighbor, Marcus Chen. Marcus is an HOA homeowner who is popular in the neighborhood because he organizes the annual block party and coaches youth soccer. He has lived in Desert Vista for 5 years, and he has dealt with Alicia before. I knocked on his door after my evening shift and showed him the clipboard with the timeline and the notices. Marcus invited me in and made coffee. He looked at the documents and shook his head. He said Alicia had pulled similar stunts on 3 other homeowners in the past 2 years. One guy had a trailer in his driveway for a weekend while he was moving furniture, and Alicia claimed it violated the no commercial vehicles rule even though it was a personal U-Haul rental. She fined him $500 and put a lien on his house when he refused to pay. He eventually sold and moved. Another family had a trash can that blew over during a storm, and Alicia claimed it was a recurring violation and fined them daily until they hired a lawyer. The lawyer cost them $3,000, and the case was dismissed, but the stress destroyed them. Marcus said Alicia was untouchable because she controlled the finance committee, and the management company always backed her up. I asked Marcus if he would be willing to testify or write a statement if this went to court. He hesitated. He said he did not want to be the next target. I understood. But then, he said he would do it if I could prove Alicia was breaking the law, not just being petty. He said if I found real evidence of fraud or corruption, he would stand with me in front of the whole neighborhood. I thanked him and left. The next morning, I got a call from the management company. A woman named Jessica said she was the employee handling my account. She said my records request had been received, but the $50 fee only covered the January 9th hearing notice. If I wanted the other documents, I would need to pay an additional $250 because the request exceeded the standard scope. I asked what the standard scope was. She said up to 10 pages. I asked how many pages the board meeting minutes and financial records would be. She said she could not tell me until I paid the fee. I said that was circular logic. She said, "That is not my problem, that is your problem." I recognized the line. It was the same thing Alicia had said to the guy with the U-Haul, according to Marcus. Jessica was parroting Alicia. That told me Jessica was either scared of Alicia or working directly under her instructions. Either way, I was not getting anywhere with the management company. I paid the additional $250 with a credit card over the phone. Jessica said the documents would be mailed within 10 business days. I said I needed them sooner because I was facing daily fines and I needed to prepare a defense. She said, "That is not my problem. That is your problem." Then she hung up. I sat in my kitchen and did the math. 300 in fines, 50 for the first records request, 250 for the second. $600 gone in 1 week. If they kept fining me $50 a day for the salt stain, I would be out another $1,000 in 3 weeks. My savings would be gone in 2 months. The rental property plan would be dead. I called a lawyer. The consultation was free. The attorney, a woman named Rachel Diaz, listened to my story and reviewed the photos and documents I emailed her. She said I had a decent case for improper notice and procedural violations, but HOA disputes in Texas are expensive and slow. She estimated I would spend between $5,000 and $10,000 in legal fees to fight this in court, and it could take a year. She said most people just pay the fines and move because it is cheaper. I thanked her and hung up. I was not going to move. I was going to win. But I needed leverage, and I needed it fast. That afternoon, I did something I had been avoiding. I went to the Desert Vista HOA annual meeting minutes archive on the management company website and started reading every financial report from the past 3 years. It took me 6 hours. I made notes on my clipboard using a red sticky note for anything that looked suspicious. By midnight, I had found something. The HOA financial reports showed regular line items labeled vendor services and administrative consulting. The amounts were always round numbers, $500 here, $800 there, sometimes $1,200. Over 3 years, it added up to nearly $40,000. There were no vendor names attached, no receipts, No invoices. Just line items approved by the finance committee, which Alicia chaired. I cross-referenced the dates with board meeting minutes. Every time a vendor services payment was approved, Alicia was the one who motioned for approval, and the vote was always unanimous with no discussion. I pulled up Alicia's personal social media profiles. She had Facebook and Instagram, both public. I scrolled back through 3 years of posts. In July of last year, she posted photos of a vacation in Cancun with her husband. In April, she posted about a kitchen remodel with granite countertops and new appliances. In November, she bought a new Lexus SUV and posted a photo of herself standing next to it in the dealership lot. None of that proved anything by itself, but it was a pattern. Alicia was living well beyond what a finance committee volunteer should be able to afford, especially in a neighborhood where the average household income was middle class. I needed proof that the vendor services payments were going to Alicia personally. I did not have access to the HOA bank account, but I knew someone who might. I texted Marcus and asked if he knew anyone on the board who was not loyal to Alicia. He texted back 20 minutes later with a name, Greg Palmer, the board secretary. Greg was a retired accountant who had joined the board last year because he wanted to keep the neighborhood finances transparent. Marcus said Greg had clashed with Alicia multiple times over budget issues, and he might be willing to help if I approached him carefully. I met Greg at a coffee shop the next morning. He was in his late 60s, white hair, glasses, and a cautious demeanor. I showed him my clipboard and explained the salt stain violation, the phantom hearing, the escalating fines. Then I showed him my notes on the vendor services line items. I said I thought Alicia was using the HOA account to pay personal expenses, and I needed his help to prove it. Greg stared at the clipboard for a long time. Then he said, "I cannot give you the bank statements. That would violate my fiduciary duty as a board member. But I can tell you this. 3 months ago, I asked Alicia for receipts to support the vendor services payments. She told me the receipts were held by the management company and I did not have clearance to view them. I escalated to the full board. The board president, who is Alicia's friend, shut me down and said the finance committee chair has sole discretion over vendor relationships. I almost resigned, but I stayed because I knew if I left, there would be no one watching her. I asked Greg if he would be willing to request the receipts again, on the record, at the next board meeting. He said the next meeting was not for 2 weeks. I said I might not have 2 weeks. I told him about the daily fines and the records request runaround. He nodded slowly. Then he said, "There is one thing I can do. I have access to the board email archive. If Alicia sent any emails about vendor services payments, they would be in there. I can forward them to you anonymously. If you find something, you can use it." I gave Greg my personal email address. He said he would look that night and send anything relevant. I thanked him and left. I spent the rest of the day on my bus route, playing the conversation over in my head. I felt like I was building a case, but I still did not have the smoking gun. That evening, I got an email from an anonymous Gmail account. No subject line. The body of the email just said, "Attached are 3 emails from the board archive. The sender is AB. The attachments were PDFs of email chains between Alicia Blackwell and Jessica at the management company." The first email was from 2 years ago. Alicia asked Jessica to process a vendor services payment of $800 to a consulting firm called Blackwell Solutions, LLC. Jessica replied asking for a W-9 and invoice. Alicia replied, "No invoice needed. This is a standing vendor relationship approved by the board. Process the payment to the account on file." Jessica replied, "Confirmed." The second email was from last year. Alicia asked for a $1,200 vendor services payment to Blackwell Solutions. Jessica asked if the payment should be coded as a management fee or a contracted service. Alicia replied, "Coded as administrative consulting. No further documentation required." The third email was from 6 months ago. Jessica sent Alicia a message saying, "The auditor is asking for receipts for the vendor services line items. What should I tell them?" Alicia replied, "Tell them the receipts are proprietary and held by the vendor. The finance committee has reviewed and approved all payments. The auditor does not have authority to override committee decisions." I looked up Blackwell Solutions, LLC on the Texas Secretary of State Business Registry. The company was registered to Alicia Blackwell at her home address. It was a single-member LLC with no employees and no business activity listed. Alicia had created a shell company and was paying herself HOA money under the guise of consulting fees. Over 3 years, she had funneled $40,000 out of the association account and into her own pocket. I had my smoking gun. But I did not tell anyone yet. I did not correct her lie because I wanted her to commit to it in public. I knew Alicia would escalate before I had a chance to use this evidence, and I wanted her to dig herself deeper. I wanted her on the record, in front of witnesses, repeating the lie that the vendor services payments were legitimate. The next day, I got hit with the side complication that made everything worse. A winter storm rolled through Georgetown overnight and dropped 4 inches of snow. The city was not equipped for snow removal, so the streets were a mess. My trash pickup, which was scheduled for Thursday morning, was delayed. The sanitation company sent an automated message saying they would resume service on Monday. That meant my trash can sat at the curb for 3 extra days. On Saturday morning, I got a notice from Alicia claiming I had violated the trash container placement rule. The rule said trash cans could be placed at the curb no earlier than the evening before pickup and must be removed within 12 hours of pickup. My can had been out for 4 days due to the weather delay, which was beyond my control. The notice demanded I pay a $100 fine and remove the can immediately or face daily penalties. I took photos of my trash can, the snow-covered street, the sanitation company delay message on my phone, and a dozen other trash cans still sitting at curbs up and down the block. I added the photos to my clipboard with an orange sticky note labeled Trash Violation Retaliation. Then I did something that I knew would make Alicia furious. I left the trash can exactly where it was. By Monday, I had 2 active violations and $700 in fines. I also had proof that Alicia was embezzling from the HOA. I was ready to go public, but I needed the right moment. Then Marcus texted me with urgent news. He said a neighbor, an older woman named Linda Frost, had slipped on an icy patch near the community pool gate and was threatening to file a slip-and-fall report with her insurance company. Linda was blaming the HOA for failing to salt the walkway. Alicia was panicking because a slip-and-fall claim could trigger a lawsuit and an insurance audit. Marcus said Alicia was trying to pin the blame on me because my driveway salt stain proved I had been hoarding ice melt instead of sharing it with the community for safety purposes. The logic was insane, but it was also brilliant in a twisted way. If Alicia could convince the board that I was responsible for Linda's fall, she could justify the fines and the harassment as necessary enforcement actions. She could also distract from the vendor services embezzlement by making me the villain. The slip report was being filed today, and Alicia wanted to have me on the record as the cause before the insurance investigator got involved. I had maybe 6 hours before the board met for an emergency session to discuss Linda's fall. I needed to move fast. I called Rachel Diaz, the attorney, and told her I had evidence of embezzlement. She said if the evidence was solid, I should report it to the Texas Attorney General and let them investigate. I said I did not have time for that. I needed to stop Alicia today, before the board meeting, or I would be scapegoated for Linda's fall. Rachel said I could request an emergency restraining order if I could prove Alicia was harassing me with fraudulent violations. I asked what I needed for that. She said I needed documentation of the harassment pattern, proof that the violations were retaliatory, and evidence that Alicia had a financial motive to target me. I had all of that. Rachel drafted a restraining order petition and filed it with the county court that afternoon. The hearing was set for the next morning, which was too late to stop the board meeting, but it gave me legal standing to demand Alicia stop contacting me. Rachel also advised me to attend the board meeting and record everything. Texas is a one-party consent state, so I could legally record the meeting without telling anyone. I showed up at the Desert Vista HOA clubhouse at 6 p.m. The meeting room was a bland beige rectangle with folding chairs and a folding table at the front. Alicia sat at the center of the table with the board president, a middle-aged man named Ron Castillo, and Greg Palmer, the secretary. About 15 homeowners were scattered in the audience. Marcus was there, sitting near the back. Linda Frost, the woman who had slipped, was in the front row with her husband. Alicia was wearing her burgundy parka and burgundy earmuffs even though the room was heated. She had her clipboard with the color-coded sticky notes, just like mine. When I walked in, She stared at me with open hostility. I sat in the second row, pulled out my phone, opened the voice recorder app, and set the phone on my lap. Then I waited. Ron Castillo called the meeting to order. He said the board had received a report from Linda Frost regarding a slip-and-fall incident at the community pool gate. He asked Linda to explain what happened. Linda stood up and said she had been walking to the mailbox cluster on Friday afternoon when she slipped on an icy patch near the pool gate and fell hard on her hip. She said the fall left her bruised and shaken, and she believed the HOA was negligent for not salting the walkway after the storm. Ron thanked Linda and said the board took safety very seriously. Then, Alicia raised her hand. Ron nodded to her. Alicia stood up and said, "I have reviewed the weather timeline and the association's maintenance records. The storm occurred on Wednesday night. By Friday afternoon, the HOA maintenance contractor had salted all common area walkways, including the pool gate path. However, I have reason to believe the ice on Friday was caused by runoff from a nearby homeowner's excessive use of ice melt on private property. That homeowner is present tonight." She pointed at me. I stayed calm. I did not move. Alicia continued. She said, "The homeowner in question applied an excessive amount of salt to his driveway, which created runoff that refroze on the pool gate walkway. This is a clear violation of our environmental responsibility guidelines, which prohibit actions that create hazards on common property. Furthermore, this homeowner has been hoarding ice melt while other residents have struggled to obtain supplies during the shortage caused by the storm. I believe his negligence directly caused Linda Frost's fall, and I recommend the board hold him financially liable for her medical expenses and any insurance claims." The room went silent. A few people turned to look at me. I raised my hand. Ron hesitated, then said, "You will have a chance to speak during the homeowner comment period." Alicia said, "I move that we suspend the comment period and proceed directly to a vote on liability." Ron said, "That is not proper procedure. We need to hear from the homeowner first." Alicia's face flushed. She said, "Fine. Let him speak. But I want it on the record that he has already been cited for multiple violations and has refused to comply with lawful HOA directives. He is a bad faith actor." Ron said, "The floor is yours." I stood up. I held my clipboard. I did not raise my voice. I said, "Thank you. First, I want to address the claim that I caused Linda's fall. I did apply salt to my driveway after the Wednesday storm. That is standard winter maintenance and is recommended by every city public works department in the country. I did not apply excessive salt. I used approximately 2 pounds of calcium chloride ice melt, which is the amount specified on the product label for a standard 2-car driveway. I have photos of my driveway showing the application and the resulting stain, which is minimal. I also have photos of 6 other driveways on this street with identical or worse staining, proving that my use was typical and not excessive. I pulled the photos from my clipboard and held them up. A few people in the audience leaned forward to see. I continued. Second, I have reviewed the HOA maintenance records, which are public documents. The records show that the maintenance contractor did not salt the pool gate walkway until Saturday morning, a full day after Linda's fall. I have the contractor's signed service log, which I obtained through a public records request. The log clearly states that the Friday service was canceled due to equipment failure and was rescheduled for Saturday. Therefore, the ice that caused Linda's fall was not caused by runoff from my driveway. It was caused by the HOA's failure to maintain the walkway in a timely manner. I held up the contractor's log. Alicia's face went pale. Ron looked confused. Greg, the secretary, was taking notes and nodding slowly. I said, "Third, I want to address the claim that I have been cited for multiple violations. That is true. I have been cited for a salt stain on my driveway, which is not listed as a violation in the HOA covenants. I have also been cited for failing to appear at a hearing on January 9th, even though I was never notified of that hearing. I have also been cited for leaving my trash can at the curb during a citywide sanitation delay caused by the storm. All 3 citations are retaliatory and procedurally improper. I have requested documentation to support these citations, and the HOA has refused to provide it unless I pay hundreds of dollars in processing fees." Alicia stood up and said, "That is a lie. We have provided all required documentation in accordance with HOA policy. I said, do you have a copy of the January 9th hearing notice? Alicia said, that notice was sent to your address via certified mail. I said, I never received it. Do you have a tracking number or a signed receipt? Alicia hesitated. She said, the management company handles mailing. You would need to request that information from them. I said, I did request it. They told me it would cost $50. I paid the $50. They have not provided the document. Alicia said, that is not my problem. That is your problem. The room reacted. A few people murmured. Marcus, in the back, was nodding. Greg was writing furiously. Ron looked uncomfortable. Alicia realized she had just repeated her catchphrase in front of witnesses, and it made her sound petty and dismissive. I pressed the advantage. I said, I have one more thing. I have been investigating the HOA's financial records because I wanted to understand why I am being targeted with escalating fines and fees. What I found is troubling. Over the past 3 years, the HOA has paid nearly $40,000 to a vendor called Blackwell Solutions, LLC. This vendor is not listed in any board meeting minutes. There are no invoices or receipts on file. The payments are approved solely by the Finance Committee, which is chaired by Alicia Blackwell. I have discovered that Blackwell Solutions, LLC is a shell company owned by Alicia Blackwell. She has been paying herself HOA money under the guise of consulting fees. I have emails from the management company proving that Alicia instructed them to process these payments without documentation. I held up the printed emails. The room erupted. People started shouting questions. Linda Frost stood up and said, "Is that true?" Ron banged his hand on the table and said, "Order. We need order." Alicia stood up and screamed, "I do not need proof. I have authority. This is a witch hunt. He is making things up to deflect from his own violations." I said, "I have the emails right here. I also have the business registry showing that Blackwell Solutions is registered to your home address. I am happy to share these documents with the board, the homeowners, and the county district attorney." Alicia grabbed her clipboard and her purse and walked out of the meeting. Ron called after her, but she did not stop. The room was in chaos. People were shouting, demanding answers, asking to see the emails. Greg stood up and said, "I move that we suspend this meeting and schedule an emergency audit of the HOA finances." Ron, looking shell-shocked, said, "Seconded." All in favor? The vote was unanimous. Marcus came up to me after the meeting and said, "You just nuked her." I said, "I am not done yet." The next morning I went to the courthouse for the restraining order hearing. Rachel Diaz met me outside. She said Alicia had not filed a response, which meant she was either ignoring the petition or planning to contest it in person. We went into the courtroom. Alicia was already there, sitting in the front row with a man I assumed was her husband. She was wearing a business suit instead of the parka, and she had a lawyer with her, a young guy in a cheap tie. The judge, a white woman in her 50s named Judge Callahan, called the case. Rachel presented our petition and the evidence, the violation notices, the emails, the financial records, the recorded board meeting, and a signed statement from Greg Palmer confirming that Alicia had refused to provide receipts for the vendor services payments. Rachel argued that Alicia had engaged in a pattern of harassment and retaliation designed to intimidate me and extract money through fraudulent fines. Alicia's lawyer argued that the violations were legitimate enforcement actions and that my accusations of embezzlement were defamatory and unsupported. He said I was a disgruntled homeowner trying to weaponize the court system to avoid paying lawful fines. Judge Callahan asked to see the emails. Rachel handed them to the bailiff, who passed them to the judge. The judge read them in silence for 2 minutes. Then she looked at Alicia and said, "Miss Blackwell, did you create a company called Blackwell Solutions and use it to receive payments from the HOA?" Alicia said yes, but those payments were for legitimate consulting services. Judge Callahan said, "What services?" Alicia said, "Financial analysis and vendor management." Judge Callahan said, "Do you have invoices or time records documenting these services?" Alicia said, "No. The Finance Committee approved the payments based on my expertise and my work on behalf of the association. Judge Callahan said, "Did the homeowners vote to approve these payments?" Alicia said, "The Finance Committee has discretion to approve vendor payments without a homeowner vote." Judge Callahan said, "Did you disclose to the board or the homeowners that you were the owner of Blackwell Solutions?" Alicia hesitated. Then she said, "I did not think it was necessary because I was acting in good faith." Judge Callahan said, "Miss Blackwell, paying yourself HOA funds without disclosure is embezzlement. I am granting the restraining order and ordering you to cease all contact with the petitioner. I am also referring this matter to the district attorney for criminal investigation. This hearing is concluded." Alicia stood up, her face white. Her lawyer tried to say something, but the judge had already left the bench. Alicia walked out of the courtroom without looking at me. I felt a wave of relief so strong I almost collapsed. Rachel said, "You did it." I said, "What happens now?" She said, "The district attorney will investigate. If they find enough evidence, they will charge her with theft and fraud. The HOA will likely vote to remove her from the board and sue her to recover the stolen funds. You should also file a complaint with the Texas Real Estate Commission because the management company employee, Jessica, was complicit in the embezzlement. As for your fines, they are void. The restraining order prohibits Alicia from enforcing them, and the board will almost certainly rescind them once the audit is complete." I thanked Rachel and paid her fee. Then I went home. 2 days later, I got a call from Ron Castillo, the board president. He said the emergency audit had been completed by an independent accountant. The accountant had confirmed that Alicia had stolen $38,000 from the HOA over 3 years. The board had voted unanimously to remove Alicia from her position and to refer the matter to law enforcement. Ron also said the board had voted to rescind all fines and violations issued to me, and to reimburse me for the $600 I had paid in fees and processing costs. He apologized on behalf of the board and said they were implementing new financial controls to prevent future fraud. I thanked Ron and hung up. I felt vindicated, but I also felt exhausted. The fight had consumed 2 weeks of my life and cost me sleep, money, and peace of mind. But I had won, and I had protected my savings and my dream of owning a rental property. 1 week later, Marcus texted me and said there was going to be a special homeowners meeting to discuss the scandal and elect a new finance committee chair. He said a lot of people wanted me to run for the position because I had exposed the corruption. I texted back and said I was not interested in being on the board. I just wanted to live in peace and drive my bus and save my money. Marcus replied with a laughing emoji and said, "Fair enough. You have earned it." But the story was not quite over. On a Saturday morning in early February, I was shoveling snow from my driveway when I saw a burgundy parka walking down the street. It was Alicia. She was carrying a cardboard box and heading toward the community pool gate. I stopped shoveling and watched. She walked to the gate, set the box down, and pulled out a key. She tried to unlock the gate. The key did not work. She tried again. Then she kicked the gate and screamed something I could not hear. I pulled out my phone and started filming. Alicia noticed me. She walked toward my driveway. I kept filming. She stopped at the edge of my property and said, "You ruined my life." I said, "You ruined your own life. You stole from your neighbors." She said, "I provided services. I worked hard for this community. You do not know what it takes to run an HOA." I said, "I know what it takes to follow the law. You did not." She said, "I am going to sue you for defamation." I said, "Go ahead. I have recordings, emails, financial records, and a judge's ruling. You will lose." She stared at me for a long moment. Then she said, "That is not my problem. That is your problem." She turned and walked away. I watched her go. Then I sent the video to Ron Castillo with a note. Alicia Blackwell attempted to access HOA common property after being removed from the board. Recommend you change the locks and issue a formal trespass warning. Ron replied within an hour. He said the board had already changed the locks, and they would be sending Alicia a certified letter barring her from the clubhouse and all common areas. He thanked me for the video and said it would be added to the case file. 3 weeks later, I got a letter from the district attorney's office. It said Alicia Blackwell had been charged with theft and fraud. The case was proceeding to trial. I was listed as a witness. I filed the letter in my clipboard under a purple sticky note labeled Victory. I kept driving my bus. I kept saving my money. I kept my driveway salted and my trash can on schedule. The HOA elected a new finance committee, and they implemented transparent budgeting and monthly financial reports. The neighborhood slowly returned to normal. I never saw Alicia again. I heard from Marcus that she and her husband moved out of state to avoid the trial. The HOA sued her in civil court and won a judgment for the full amount of the stolen funds plus legal fees. They never collected because Alicia declared bankruptcy. As for me, I bought my rental property 6 months later. It is a small duplex near the university, and it generates enough income to cover my mortgage and give me a cushion for retirement. I still live in Desert Vista, and I still keep my clipboard with the color-coded sticky notes. I do not need it anymore, but I like having it as a reminder. A reminder that when someone tries to bully you with paperwork and bogus fees and manufactured violations, you can fight back. You can gather evidence. You can find allies. You can use their own rules against them. And sometimes, if you are patient and you do not give up, you can win.